Right, so share screen and slideshow from the beginning. And all righty. So we're gonna give you a background on DETOR, which is the new direction in electronic test orders and results. So we all know this part. So I took these from the intro slide for the jurisdictions. So we all know if you try to connect with one partner, you've connected with one partner, and you try to connect to another partner, it's yet another interface and could be different formats. So you have to try to go, support all these different formats. And it's really hard to do when you don't have a lot of resources that have those qualifications. So that's where AIMS comes in. So we have the APHL Informatics Messaging Service. It's a cloud-based service that is already connected to a lot of different public health partners and healthcare partners, FSMA and HIPAA compliant, and already exchanges a lot of messages, but not necessarily for the eTOR use case yet. So same picture as before, we have public health labs on one side and the healthcare organizations on the other side. Each public health lab might take a different format, but we only have to set up an interface once to DETOR on AIMS. And then if they want to connect to a different partner, we have to work with that particular partner for their particular data structure and vocabulary, but we don't have to redo the connection on the public health lab side. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And similarly, if that same healthcare organization utilizes a different public health lab, their connection doesn't have to be set up. Their format doesn't have to get set up. A new vocabulary has to be added and CLIA validation has to be done, but a lot of the other additional work falls away. So that's kind of the idea of DETOR. And in the past, APHL has tried to push all the partners to be adherent to the standard. And we found that is really, really hard, partly because obviously everybody's using vendors. And if the vendors don't support the standard that you're trying to implement, then it's costly for your partners to implement that standard. So we've gone with DETOR, allowing DETOR to do transformation and translations. So here's a list of the different benefits, our sales pitch. Why should you guys use DETOR? And then specifically, the use case of newborn screening is what we're starting with at the moment, though some of the ones that Melissa was talking about, Wyoming and New Hampshire, actually, Ruslan was talking about that, New Hampshire and Wyoming, they're not doing newborn screening. They're going to do STDs and TB testing. But anyway, we've started with newborn screening. We went live in September of 2024 with Orlando Health. This is a little bit older numbers, but I think they're at 36,000 orders and results that have passed through DETOR since they went live in September. And we did make them record how long it took them on their workflow side for how many hours they saved. So they used to have to download the PDF and then manually attach it to the record for it to be available in their health record. And that's about 130 hours of time saved entering the results over a month period. But to me, more importantly, is that the results were available to the patient and the provider 2 days earlier than before. So rather than having to wait for 6.2 days, now the results are there in 4.4 days. So That's Orlando Health. We also have some numbers, I think, from Fairbanks, but I didn't pull that slide into here yet. And then we use our standard TA approach. We're doing some pre-implementation work, and then we're working on the gap analysis. And because we've been working with different LIS and EHR vendors already, we have a head start just knowing which EHR vendor the healthcare organization has and which LIS vendor the public health lab has. We're working on the configuration specifically for each lab. And then we're going through validation. First, we do some initial validation just to make sure the piping works and some of the bigger things. So one of our initial validation use cases is all abnormal results. Well, that baby would not be alive, right? But it helps us to see some of the issues that we might run into once we start CLIA validation. And then we have a separate time frame set up for CLIA validation. And once we're completed with CLIA validation, the CLIA lab director signs off on those documentations, and then we move to production. So what kind of technical assistance do we provide? We have the developers that create Detour and do all the mapping, and then we have the TA team that is a PM, a workflow SME, because when you're going from paper to electronic ordering, their workflow is going to change. And we have a technical architect that deals with the connectivity issues. And obviously we have Rosalind and Melissa as the terminologist for actually doing the mapping for each of the partners. From a tool perspective, we have JIRAs for time tracking and for issue tracking. We use Confluence for reference documents like for all the other projects, a Smartsheet for the gap analysis, and Symedical for our terminology mapping, and Dash for testing and in production. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Sure. So I am going to talk about a few of the tools we use, and then I'll pass it over to Rosalind to kind of continue in that with the Symedical piece. So right now we're using Smartsheet, and we do that for like user management, the partner engagement, mostly like Rosalind and I would use it as in the gap analysis. And so we have, it all in there. We are talking and exploring like other options to move that into, because I feel like at some point, maybe sooner than later, we're going to hit the max for Smartsheet, and just trying to keep everything in sync has been a bit of a challenge in there. But we also have all our CLIA validation test cases and everything in there as well. Yes. So another tool we have Dash. And so this is an online tool that we use to manage the test orders and results. And so we have two different Dash environments, the onboard and the production. And so both us at central office, like the TA team and everybody, as well as everyone at the HCOs and PHL have access to Dash. And so the TA team uses Dash to, assist in method validation during both the initial and the CLIA validation testing. And so we can see within there, any structural errors, did the messages actually come through, and in any transcoding issues. And similarly, the PHLs and the HCO can also look at those things. And especially once we go into production, they have that visibility and they're able to track their own messages. And so without as much, involvement from us. And so they can do the message reconciliation. Did the messages, were they sent? Did they get received by the HCO or PHL? How many? They can see volume and everything. And I have a few screenshots on Dash on the next few slides. And then structural errors and warnings, and then any transcoding failures. And so this is the top half of the Dash screen here, and you can see we have a few different groups at the top. So, and we can filter and look at it by any of these different. So the event types, you can, filter by order, result, Newborn screening right now is the only use case, but as Ricky said, clinical will soon be in here. And then senders and recipients we can filter by, and if there's any transcoding or structural errors. And then you see a graph down there at the bottom, and that shows the message volume. So we can kind of, take a quick look and see, if there's any dips or peaks or anything in the messages that we're receiving, or kind of maybe alert us to any potential issues fairly quickly, hopefully. Next slide. Yep. So this is the bottom half of that same screen. And so this actually shows the individual messages here. And so each side would only see theirs. We at central office can see all the various different PHLs and HCOs, but they would only see the relevant messages for them. And they can see each and every one, the time that it was received, the placer, the filler order numbers, and the senders and the recipients are over there in the far right columns. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see what we see when we click on one of those messages. And so we have a few different groups here that we see, the errors and the warnings. So this is like structural validation, like in this particular one, the NK1 was missing the city-state zip fields. And so we see those messages there. Can also be any errors. And then on the transcoding, which I should have added a screenshot for that as well. But yeah, I didn't include one on for that. I should have. But it's a very similar setup to this. And it says like, so for example, like if there's a new LOINC code, it would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the LOINC code, and then have a second column that says the target catalog. So we know that, we have a new LOINC code, and it's in the target catalog was the HCO lab analyte table or whatever it happens to be. And so we can go and look inside medical and follow up and get that information mapped. Or if you're the sites looking at this information, they can also put in a JIRA ticket or go into Waypoint and some other tools that Reslin will show you in a moment. And go to the next one. And so Ricky mentioned the S3 buckets. And so we're able to actually see the messages. And so this is, we don't have access to this part for production. We just have it for Sandbox and Onboard, which are some test environments. But so through all the initial validation and the CLIA testing, we're able to utilize this tool. And so we can view the messages. We can download any order or result messages sent by the HCO or PHL. We're also able to access messages from each step in the process. So we don't just see the initial message sent and then the output, but we can actually, I can't remember, maybe like up to like 10 or so different steps throughout the process, which can help diagnose various different issues. And you can see like if the message fails and it doesn't actually, produce that last one, or if there's an issue with it, we can kind of trace it back and look at the various different steps of the message. We can also use this to upload order and result messages and send it through. So the HCO or the PHL can send messages, but we also have the ability to upload them in here as well, which can help with testing also.
Yeah, sometimes when the HCO or the PHL, or during testing, run into an issue and they have to do some fixes, it's easier for us to just replay a message than bother the public health lab or the HCO, vice versa. We're trying to keep some of that work when just one side needs to test the fix that they had to do during testing. We can help with that.
Mm-hmm. And I
also
think
comes in handy. Oh, sorry. It comes in handy.
No, I was gonna say pass it to you is actually what I was gonna say.
Oh, well, I was just
Go
gonna finish
ahead.
on here. So it comes in handy to when we sometimes have to mock up something in the message to test various things also. Like it's very,
Mhm.
very useful. Yeah.
Yep. All righty. All Roslyn.
All right. So SciMedical, so Clinical Architecture is the company, I guess, that provides this SciMedical tool, which is our terminology vocabulary tool. Sure, some of you are familiar with it. So we use it for the terminology mapping services, maintain the catalogs and maps for each HCO and PHL, and also our middle ground, the detour intermediary catalogs, which are our standard catalogs that we maintain. And so the HCO and the PHL catalogs get mapped to this middle ground standard intermediary catalogs. And then the preferred terminology is returned, to the HCO or PHL. So like like if a map to SNOMED or whatever they prefer, I guess that we return that. And I'll talk about more about it. We also have the ability to set up notifications for like any new terms that come in or any unmapped terms, errors that like various things that happen. We can set up email notifications for the APHL folks and the HCO or PHL users also. And then we also have two runtimes. So we have the test runtime is during the testing and all the clear validations and everything prior to production happens in the test runtime. And then before we go live, like a couple days before, we'll publish all those maps to production runtimes or runtime. Yeah, production, yeah. So the vocabulary, yep, is maintained in SciMedical, and like it says here, we have all the standard LOINC and SNOMED terminology codes. So SciMedical provides a subscription portal, which is like a portal where they have all the hundreds of different catalogs, value sets, fire maps that you can subscribe to. And when you subscribe to them, they're kind of get downloaded to, or your local environment. And so SciMedical clinical architecture keeps those updated so that really is helpful for us. So like if there's a new version of LOINC that comes out, they will, update their catalogs, and then because we're subscribed, we can set it to like auto update or manually update. You can choose what subscription you want to have. And then it will update what we have, locally, our local catalogs with those new terms. So that's very, very helpful. So SciMedical Waypoint is a like a browser page where so SciMedical we have the APHL people, the TA team, we use the client, SciMedical client that is installed on our system. And then the SciMedical Waypoint is a like a website, a web portal that we have access to, but it's primarily for the HCO and PHL people to be able to manage their vocabulary. When we set up a new HCO and PHL, usually me or Melissa, we would set up the maps, and then we'll review with them using this waypoint, and sign off on and so the HCO people are able to log in to this web page, and they will only see their maps, and they can review the mappings and make notes, add comments if they don't like something. They can correct them, and so that's what the waypoint is used for, basically for the the external people to be able to see those maps.
Okay.
Yeah.